Good afternoon, everyone. It's indeed a great delight to welcome all of you to the Sahitya Academy's program this afternoon, which is a symposium with the title Centering India Comparative Literature Courses in Indian Academia. As we are all aware, the Sahitya Academy is responsible for spreading the idea of literature as a social construct, as translation, and it also gives awards for quality and excellent writing in 24 languages. It's indeed a great joy for me to have served the Sahitya Academy in the capacity of the convener of the English Advisory Board until a few years ago. And at present, I am a member of the English Advisory Board. Dr. Sanjukta Das Gupta is the current chair of that board. So this particular program comes under the aegis of the English board, and I'm very happy to see my co-speakers. The responsibility given to me is to chair the session and to take it along by occasionally intervening with observations and questions. I'd like to begin by mentioning that this is a very important subject that we are picking up today, the status of comparative literature courses in India. And given the eminent scholars of the discipline who are on the panel, my role is merely just as that of a facilitator. However, I'd like to take a few minutes to flag some issues which seem important to me. And my discipline is English and not really comparative literature. So to begin with, my first query is, in what way has the definition of comparative literature changed when the subject has been introduced in Indian universities? We are, of course, aware that the beginnings of the formal teaching of comparative literature in European universities used literature and culture as the basis. We know that English, French, and German programs focused on the canons in their own national traditions, but also recognized that readers of literature and the writers of literature often cross boundaries of one nation into another nation in terms of language and culture. And in European comparative literature departments also, there is a certain kind of a change coming in. But this afternoon, we're looking at India with focused eyes, and we might want to recall the foundational work of Professor Shishir Kumar Das, who was my contemporary at Delhi University. And I'm thinking particularly of the book that he edited along with Omeo Dev, Comparative Literature, Theory and Practice. For these eminent scholars and critics, the Indian context was significant because we're dealing with multiple languages and intersecting cultures, and these are coexisting within one country, one national boundary. So the goal, according to Professor Das, was, and I'm quoting, an enlargement of taste and an inheritance of the total achievement of literature. So my question to all of you today is about the evolution of that goal. Is the comparison along linguistic or regional lines within India? And does it at any point incorporate diaspora writers in the curriculum? My second issue stems from the first one, and that is I'm interested in the post-colonial impulse of comparative literature courses in India. Has it in some ways been writing back to the empire in various forms of revisiting both the assumed legacy of language and also the hierarchy within which the languages have traditionally been configured? Do the courses sufficiently explore the connections of literature with history, philosophy, politics, and literary theory? In a slightly tangential manner, I'd like to remind ourselves of what happened in Kenya when Ngugi and his contemporaries took down the idea of English literature and replaced it with the introduction of African literatures at Nairobi University. And the syllabus formally incorporated various traditions of the geographical space of Africa. I'm quoting Googie here. The question of literary excellence implies a value judgment as to what is literary and what is excellence, and from whose point of view. Today, I may ask in our present context of India, where comparative literature syllabi overlap with courses in English departments or courses in modern Indian literature. The post-colonial impulse has not done away with English in our universities, but has it changed the critical lens by which the books of English literature are viewed and studied and given a comparative approach? And third, and finally, I would want to mention that the Sahitya Academy awards for translation and for the best books in various languages, in various categories, extends to 24 languages. And there is a mandate for the award-winning book in each language to be translated into the other 23. So I would be interested in knowing if such rich material generated by Sahitya Academy, and for that matter, the translation work that has become so significant and also prolific in the publication industry in India, how much of it is helping comparative literature departments in the making of their course curriculum, and how can the departments encourage this process so that more and more of comparative approaches come into our academic programs and the literatures of the country open up further. And I'd like to end by quoting Professor Nobunita Deb Sen, who was also a great leader for comparative literature. And according to her, the comparative departments push beyond the boundaries of a single literary criticism. They go beyond the study of a single literature. And in fact, they should break conventional fences of aesthetic appreciation. They should be looking into historical criticism, and they should be interdisciplinary. So are we doing this kind of work? And so my particular question here would be, in the comparativist model for India, are we extending the boundaries of literature to art and aesthetics? So I thank all of you for giving me the privilege of foregrounding some issues that have come to my mind. I look forward to welcoming and hearing each one of the eminent panel members here. And I would request each of you to take about 10 or 12 minutes in the first round. The Sahitya Academy has given us 2 hours for this symposium. So let us have the possibility of coming back with our observation and comments on the other speakers, because we will have a little time. As for the listeners, I would be very grateful if they put their questions in the chat box, and I will return to them towards the end of the session. So may I introduce our first panelist, Professor Chandra Mohan. He is the General Secretary of the Comparative Literature Association of India and the Chair of the International Comparative Literature Association Standing Committee for Research on South Asian Literatures and Cultures. His recent publications include The Worldview of Lao Tse and the Vedic Sages, a Comparative Perspective, Aesthetics, the East and the West, a Study in Expression, Tagore and Croce, volume on Dusk to Dawn, Poetic Voices for the Current Times, History and Politics, South Asian Narratives, and several more. Dr. Chandra Mohan is also the Goodwill Ambassador for the Foundation in India. And of course, he has held eminent positions in the Indian Association for Canadian Studies. He's also taught in several universities other than his host college of Delhi. He has been in Calgary and Miami International, received the Fulbright Senior Fellowship and the Seeki Fellowships in Canadian Studies. Welcome, Dr. Chandra Mohan. You have a vast source of knowledge to share some of that with us today. Thank you. Dr. Chandra Mohan, you're muted.
Okay. No, thank you. Thank you, Professor Malashri Lal, and also thank you, Dr. Rao. And along with me is here our friend, Mr. Verma, to help us. Now, and my colleagues who are here, whom I can see, and also those who are awaiting their turn to come here again and again. Now, the first two, I will be trying to finish my paper in 12 minutes. I will read it point-wise. The first 2 points of my presentation belong to, this is called, what is comparative literature status today? It is important because I wrote them out when I received the first circular from Sahitya Academy highlighting that area. But it is relevant to this also. Now I say it is a well-known fact that the Department of Comparative Literature at Jadavpur University was started in 1956, and it enjoys the reputation of being a distinguished department to offer a subject which is distinct not only in India, but also the world over. This example was followed by the Department of Modern Indian Language and Literary Studies in Delhi in 1966, 61, and then again it was followed by, this is called, Kamaraj University, Madurai Kamaraj University, that was in 1966. They were initially the full-fledged departments, but now their number has risen. Now I can count about 10 full-fledged departments which are in the country, plus more than 50 or 60 those departments which have strong component of comparative literature in single literature departments. Anyway, a turning point, this is my realization and my research tells me that a turning point in that perception and major development in the field of comparative literature in India as a fully recognized discipline emerged when the Central Universities Act 2009 was adopted by the Parliament of India in the 60th year of Republic of India. It was an amazing change of thought when a large number of newly established central universities gave priority to introduce full-fledged departments of comparative literature and translation studies. I would like to refer to the historic statement made by Professor Jancy James, then the founder, Vice Chancellor of Central University of Kerala, and also at that time, she was the president of CLI. And she spoke in the meeting of the Vice Chancellors, consisting of 16 new established central universities. And she said with confidence that when she was asked that what will be the priority of your university, she said, and I quote, that my priority is to set up the comparative literature department in the university. She highlighted the importance of the discipline in the quest of its own identity and direction in a multilingual country like India. This well-realized initiative was followed by the vice chancellors of 2 more universities, Professor R.K. Kale, Central University of Gujarat, and Professor M.M. Solanke, Central University of Rajasthan. To begin with, these 3 universities established the Department of Comparative Literature and Translation Studies. Now, during the last 10 years, I would like to point out that the central universities have organized high-level international conferences in collaboration with Comparative Literature Association of India. Now, how does the pedagogy goes into their framing, the syllabus and the conference schedule? In framing their thematic note for call for papers, they had kept in view the essential ingredients and current approaches in defining the main theme and sub-themes of the conference. They saw that Indian model follows not only our standard comparative literature awareness, but also it follows the global consciousness, which is attributed to India's continued involvement in the international community of scholars through the ICLA and the effect that cultural studies and world literature have exerted in the field. Now, 3 significant publications come which showed the way to the coming people. One was Interdisciplinary Alternatives in Comparative Literature, edited by Professor E.V. Ramakrishnan, Harish Trivedi, and Chandra Mohan. The second was, this is from Central University of Gujarat. The second was Quest of a Discipline, New Academic Directions for Comparative Literature, edited by Rizio Raj from Central University of Kerala. And then Discoursing Minority, edited by Anisur Rahman and Supriya Agarwal. This was from Central University of Rajasthan. Now, these volumes were welcomed as a milestone in the development of comparative literature in the new areas of interdisciplinarity, theoretical and critical approaches. Now, I am really heralded to point out one thing which has happened only in India, because we are proud of that. University Grants Commission has initiated a scheme which is known as Incentivization of Teachers Subject Discipline-Based Association for organizing of various academic and research activities during the 11th plan. We were indeed lucky to have been included in this scheme, and we got about 6 funding programs for our international conferences. That was a milestone. We could not expect that we'll get money from 6 lakhs to 10 lakhs every year after 2 years. And that really put the whole wheel of knowledge in comparative literature into the main swing. Along with this provision, the UGC also provided NET program for the subject of comparative literature, which worked as an impetus to the scholars and teachers in the departments of comparative literature and translation studies. Now, as the focus on comparative literature courses in Indian academia is concerned, let me say, as I already pointed out in one line, that a full-fledged program in MA and MPhil on comparative literature existed in 10 universities. I'm not going to count them, but I can highlight, since there are 10, they are number 1, Jadavpur, number 2, this was in Delhi, number 3 was Central University of Hyderabad, 4th was IFLU at Hyderabad, 5th was Faculty and Department of Comparative Literature of Central University, Gujarat, Gandhinagar, 6th was Department of Comparative Literature, Vishwa Bharati University, Shantiniketan, Department of Comparative Indian Literature, and that is CILL, University of Calcutta, MA in Comparative Indian Language and Literature, postgraduate program, that is choice-based credit system, that was University of Calcutta again, and Center for Comparative Literature, Translation and Interpreting Studies at Sri Sri University, Cuttack, of which we are proud of. And lastly, I may also mention Center for Comparative Indian Literature at the Department of Assamese, University of Dibrugarh, Assam. So this is an overall picture of the central universities and the other universities which have provided a full-fledged studies department in comparative along with translation. This is the fulcrum of the whole thing. Now I have in my list more than 50 universities which have provided strong component of comparative, and along with Malayalam and Hindi in Kerala, then in Rajasthan it is Hindi, then it is in Kupam University, it is Telugu, then there are all these things, and Rajkot and also other Jaipur and Gaur University in Sagar. Now, this is fine. In order to cut short and in order to make visibility of my senior scholars, and you would also like to know what is happening in these areas with regard to the mail which we have received from Professor Malashri Lal, underlining the pedagogical choices and what have been the philosophy behind their framing for this. And here I will first is a mail from Professor Shantanu Das Gupta. I will only sum up what they want to say. Shantanu Das Gupta puts emphasis on translation. And he says, the centering of Indian literature in comparative literature can only happen when Indian literature is available in translation. In this respect, we must recognize the tremendous work done by Sahitya Akademi. Apart from the Academy, many university departments have also been contributing to this. For example, Center for Translation of Indian Literatures, that is CENTIL, along with CAS, have contributed a lot, and which is headed by Dr. Shantanu Dasgupta. It has focused on translating various Indian languages into English, Bengali, and Nepali. In recent years, it has worked towards bringing out Indian Nepali language and short story and this and this. The second observation has come from Professor Amitabh Chakravarti, HOD, Indian Language and Literary Studies. Now, Amitabh's focus, he highlights, is it is on interrelations of literatures. In other words, we can say their focus is on interdisciplinarity. And he says the most significant strength of the department is the fact that its various Indian languages has gone beyond that training in the orienting themselves in comparative literary and cultural studies. Moreover, contemporary research in humanities has become hugely interdisciplinary. The department has experts in folklorists, tribal lore, oral literature, film studies, and semiotics, and intermediality and cultural studies. These courses not only expand the horizon of researchers' critical theory, and also at the same time, it has opened up unexplored terrain of research opportunities. And the other related point is very important, and I repeat and I read it. It is a result of these unique academic approaches that the department has attracted international students from Korea, from Sri Lanka, from China, and a few of them already are teaching in the university departments of their country. Now, with this, interdisciplinarity I have already mentioned, I need not repeat it, but in addition to that, the emphasis are also on history, South Asian studies, anthropology, and other fine arts and departments. Then third is Dr. Zakia.
May I please request you to conclude, because you're making very important points. Maybe we'll come back to it, but I'm sorry for interrupting, but we really will have to move on.
So should I only I can 2 minutes and then sum it up. Is it okay?
I've been as generous as possible. We don't want to cut into the other speakers. So maybe we can just move on to the next speaker and come back to you later, if you don't mind.
Okay, it's fine.
Okay. No, indeed, very important points, and I'm sorry for cutting it short, because what you're saying about the senior people in the discipline who have written to you and who have talked about the various directions in which changes happen, these are probably points that will be taken up by the others, and we'll come back to you in a little while. So may I move on to our next speaker? This is Dr. Rindon Kundu, who is presently working as Assistant Professor of English at Sri Sri University, a university that Dr. Chandramohan just mentioned. He's been appointed as the Director of Sri Sri Center for Translation and Interpreting Studies. He's also acting as the Treasurer of the Comparative Literature Association of India, as well as the South Asian Regional Director of the International Association of Eco-Translation Research. Dr. Kundu has been awarded several international grants, such as the IATIS 2018, the Hong Kong bursary holder by International Association of Translation and Intercultural Studies, a full grant by the British Academy to participate in the African Translation and Interpreting Studies Writing Workshop in 2019, and a Young Researcher Travel Grant 2019 by European Society for Translation Studies. Recently, Dr. Rindon Kundu received the Volkswagen Foundation grant to work on a project in Germany. Over to you, Dr. Kundu. Looking forward to your presentation of 10 to 12 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me first thank Professor Madhav Srilal, Honorable Chair of the panel, and J.K. Verma, Assistant Editor of Sahitya Academy, for inviting me and giving me the space with all my respected professors. I would like to start my talk with a small introduction of the status of comparative literature in Odisha, the state where I'm currently teaching. The study of comparative literature as an academic discipline in Odisha presents a picture which is not different from most of the states in India. The similarity is immediately visible in the absence of a university department dedicated entirely to the pursuit of comparative literature. Like elsewhere in India, departments of literature such as Odia, Hindi, and Sanskrit engaged primarily in the study of single language literatures. Now, in the 1970s, the Department of English, Sambalpur University, floated a special paper in comparative literature for MA students. And the syllabus of the comparative literature comprised a few texts from European classical, Sanskrit, Odia, and some of English literature texts. Now, few books and essays which introduced comparative literature were also prescribed in the reference. Around the same time, the English department of Utkal University, Bhubaneswar, introduced a special paper in comparative literature and translation studies. As part of their assignment, the students of Utkal University, they were translating portions of an Odia literary text to English. And this can also be seen as an attempt to create a space for an Indian literature in a department of English. Now, in Odia departments, unlikely the literatures of our, even our neighboring states, Bengal and Assam and Bihar, they were not discussed. Thus, monolingualism ruled the roost in the departments of Odia literatures. Now, given the fact that the culture of Odisha represents a vibrant confluence of many traditions, languages, and literatures, it's surprising that the institutional study of comparative literature has not struck very deep roots here. Now, Odia literature itself assumed a distinctive identity through an energetic dialogue, and we know about Sarala Das' monumental version of the epic that composed in the 15th century engaged in a lively rewriting and reconceptualizing of Vyasa's epic. We also know that Balaram Das's retelling of Valmiki's Ramayana in the 16th century. But the geographical location of Odisha also forms a bridge between the northern states and the southern states, and it has an enriching culture of assimilation. But unfortunately, there is no single department on comparative literature in entire Odisha. That is the now if the university where I'm presently teaching is comparatively a new university set up under the Private University Bill Odisha in 2009, and I'm teaching English as undergraduate and postgraduate program in the Faculty of Arts, Communication, and Indic Studies, where comparative literature is an optional paper in MA and world literature is an elective paper in the BA syllabus. And in the MA syllabus, the paper that we have on comparative literature, it has the concept and trajectory, the definition and scope, the development of disciplines, problems and methods in comparative literature. But at the same time, when it comes to the other units, it is actually following that West versus East model. One text from the West and then one text from the East. And then the comparative study you have to do. So these are the problems that I'm facing in this paper, and along with that, I also want to highlight that we all know that very recently UGC has floated this LOCF, Learning Outcome Based Curriculum Framework, and if we go through that, curriculum, we'll see that there are 3 papers that UGC has recommended in the graduation English syllabus. One is Indian Classical Literature, where UGC is, in the framework it is writing, I'm quoting from that LOCF document, to understand, analyze, and appreciate various Indian classical texts with comparative perspective. Then, the other paper that they have, said European Classical Literature, which again, according to the LOCF, It will examine different ways of reading and using literary texts across a wide range of classical authors, genre, and periods with comparative perspectives. And then another paper, World Literature, LOCF document is saying that it will discuss, this paper will discuss evolution of world literature in relation to other related concepts like national literature, general literature, comparative literature, and Vishwa Sahitya. So we can see that, you know, in the LOCF document, UGC is continuously foregrounding the comparative methodology, but there is an absence of the paper, you know, the entire discipline as such. Now, if we go to the National Education Policy 2020, this has very recently, you know, we have seen that. And in that NEP document, the present government, you know, is saying that higher education institutions across the country should foster stronger liberal education and innovative relevant research. All institutes supporting language programs will be funded to study and teach comparative literature. So this is one, you know, positive point that I have found in the NEP for the comparative literature discipline. Now I'll come to my observations, and this is entirely my personal observation, how we can, in this post-COVID era, can think about expanding the comparative literature as a discipline. Now, we all have witnessed how COVID has been a transformative agent in the country and enforced a digital mode of teaching and learning. We also become hybrid objects, and an awareness of transforming our life become primary. So people also started thinking about this change more seriously than before. Sooner or later, the universities too responded to this change brought upon by COVID, and the faculties were quick enough to switch to the new mode of teaching and learning. Now, due to the digital revolution, students too also become more flexible in terms of attending classes and tutorials. We all know that earlier the relationship between universities and students were one-sided. Universities decide what will be the course curriculum and the methodology of teaching and learning. Students are supposed to follow. The universities were successful also in this way because there has been a rising demand for universities, except for some countries, you know. So we have seen that the question is now how the students need after the change brought by the COVID. They want to, I think that the students want to see the flexibility in the course content, course duration, and course combination between major and minor, which has also been floated by the NEP 2020. It is not practically possible, I understand, for one university to showcase all the required expertise to run all the courses, English, comparative, translation, world literature, everything, due to the lack of teaching ability as well as expertise in that specific university. Therefore, using this flexibility in the courses within the university or outside university is going to be the next major thing I understand, you know. In this context, I am, you know, floating this idea, can we think about sharing the expertise of comparative literature and comparative Indian literature departments like Jadavpur University, University of Hyderabad, Delhi University, English and Foreign Language University, Assam University, University of Calcutta, Vishwabharati, Guwahati, Central University of Gujarat, so that the universities, you know, mentioned here and other interested universities like my university and other universities where there is no comparative literature departments as such, can build a network, and students can approach these comparative literature and comparative Indian literature departments to pursue certain courses, and there should be a model of credit transfer, universal, you know, pan-India model for credit transfer. It will also cut the cost of education, as the students do not have to go physically to the university. And since NEP 2020 has recognized the issue of time factor also, all the comparative literature and comparative Indian literature departments across India can think about different courses of different level, which will not be stringent with time, which will be flexible in design, so that the students from other universities, especially from the single literature departments, can join the courses and opt out as they wish, fulfilling the minimum requirement. That's all for now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rindan Kundu, for a very thoughtful presentation, both informative and also projecting certain possibilities for future collaboration between departments. Personally, I appreciate that idea very much because you're entirely right in saying that flexibility and the use of digital technology is the way education will move. So why should we be bound by the physicality of our campus spaces and the departmental resources that are always limited? So thank you. I'm sure we'll come back to these ideas again. Professor Shoma Mukherjee is our next speaker. Professor Mukherjee is Assistant Professor of Comparative Literature in the Center for Comparative Literature at Vishwabharati. Her research interests are Indian literature, Ramkatha tradition, cross-cultural literary studies, popular literature and culture, literatures of Africa. Professor Shoma Mukherjee has co-edited a book titled Tracing Transactions, an anthology of critical essays on India and the Southeast, published 2011. And she has edited a book titled Comparative Literature, Terms and Concepts, published in 2015. Welcome, Professor Mukherjee. Looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Professor Lal. I am audible. Am I audible?
Yes,
okay.
You are.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Lal, and thank you. I would like to thank the Sahitya Akademi for organizing the symposium. So I will begin my presentation. As a student and practitioner of comparative literature in India, and also as part of the fortunate few who can quote unquote teach comparative literature in an Indian university, my presentation starts with a little backstory. In 2019, Center for Comparative Literature, Vishwabharati, conceptualized and we were trying to organize a one-day symposium. The title of the symposium was Comparative Literature Today, the Indian Scenario, a symposium on the state of the discipline in India in collaboration with Sahitya Akademi. The concept note was prepared by Dr. Nilanjana Bhattacharya of Center for Comparative Literature, and later on the symposium was slated to be coordinated by Dr. Dhiman Bhattacharya and Shoma Mukherjee of CCL Vishwabharati. Various colleagues who are teaching in different centers, departments of comparative literature were contacted from they were from different parts of the India, and the scheduled symposium was due to be held in late February 2020, but it got postponed due to insufficient funds in Sahitya Akademi. The concept note of the above-mentioned symposium was conceptualized to begin a conversation with academicians from different Indian universities who are teaching and doing comparative literature in India from an official department or Center for Comparative Literature. The main objective of the symposium was to understand the methodologies employed by different practitioners from their respective locations and contexts. Also, the general expectations were that along with the canonical texts, authors, literary movements, and fashions, we can with the interaction with the others, along with the other, the famous text or classical text, we can also we can know about the unknown authors, text, traditions of the other parts of India, from the texts which are there in the other language literature system. These kinds of dialogues will give us enough literary resources to understand and constitute multiple intra-literary relations within and outside India. It can also bring to light that how themes and motifs were traveled synchronically and diachronically in various literary systems. We know about the already existing examples, such as how certain themes and motifs of Gatha Satsai re-emerged in Vaishnav Padavali in Bangla, or how the various elements of Sangam poetry were received in later Bhakti movement, etc. But more importantly, the idea was to stimulate the consciousness about the quote-unquote others and to incorporate them in our understanding of contemporary Indian literatures. The MA syllabus offered by the Center for Comparative Literature, Vishwabharati, has a compulsory language course embedded into it. As Vishwabharati has multiple language units within There are units like Assamese, Marathi, Tamil, Santali, Sanskrit, Pali, Prakrit, Urdu, Parso, Arabic, Indo-Tibetan, Chinese, Japanese, French, German, Italian, Russian, and so on. So in each academic year, students have to select one language from offered pool of languages, and they will continue with that option for next 4 semesters. The objective is to introduce the students to a different language system, and probably that will induce the students to look for new research areas in that language literature system. These kinds of literary research can overlay the way for the understanding of intra and interliterary relations. The other courses were centered on the comparative literature methodology and terms and concepts associated with the methodology. One can cite an example of Ramkatha tradition in India to explain the methodology part. We have I am using Shishir Kumar Das's the 2 terms, inherited texts and tradition and contemporary texts. We have inherited multiple Ramakatha traditions, the written, the oral, audiovisual, and all these variants are examples of how a tradition gained fame, survived, and traveled from one location to another. It constituted a literary journey as tales, Mahakabya or Itihash, as natok, as upannas, short stories, poem, etc. The literary journey, both in synchronic and diachronic levels, can trace the passage of a heroic theme, such as Ram, which was received, emerged as a figure with different characteristics in different point of time. This particular thematic part can be explained through quote-unquote difference in identity. The received text can be an example of contemporary text where the retellings are situated in the contemporary socio-political context, and race, class, caste, gender are categories of analysis through which we are looking at the panorama of a tale, that is Ramkatha, which is offering us multiple plots. We are coming across texts which are standardizing the traditions, but simultaneously the multiple renderings in various forms, mediums are dismantling that very process of standardization. Also, the interactions between the dominant, the residual, and the emergent, between the canon and the periphery, all these can decipher the process of generic evolution. We can cite Zvetan Todorov's argument here that a new genre is, I quote, a new genre is always the transformation of an earlier one or of several, by inversion, by displacement, by combination, unquote. In present context, the other important aspects is the nomenclature. Comparative literature, in the name of the, it is the nomenclature comparative literature in several centers, departments across, say, the Indian universities. We all know that in the institutional practices within India, we are coming across different nomenclatures such as comparative literature, comparative Indian literature, and Indian comparative literature, etc. In each instances, the understanding of academic logic, practice, and history of that particular location is important. We should begin prolonged conversation between practitioners to achieve that. As Professor Shapon Majumdar had said that in, I quote, in West, comparative literature is a matter of choice, and in India, it is a matter of necessity, unquote. Comparative literature and its an interaction with quote unquote single literature disciplines are necessary, but these conversations should pave the way for the academic and practical recognitions of comparative literature discipline and departments in the present day India. As a parallel to the motto of being to becoming, a comparative literature student becomes a practitioner through her or his journey of recognizing the others, and to build up her or his self through various reading and lived experiences with multiple quote-unquote others. But the methodology and its practices fundamentally do not argue for superior or inferior literary systems. Rather, the methodology thrives on mapping contact or relationship zones. In contemporary times, with the upsurge of quote-unquote doing comparative literature is a positive sign, but that does not mean that we will propagate one syllabus for doing comparative literature, because the studying the diversity of, when we are studying the diversity of text and traditions from different locations, it is the fundamental tenets of comparative literature methodology that we are looking at, the diverse text and tradition and associated, the practice in that particular location. And if Professor Lal allow me, I will just kind of try to give two, I want to say 2 points. You actually talked about, in your speech, in your in the beginning, you actually talked about diaspora literature and post-colonial literature. Here, my rejoinder would be, Professor Lal, that when we are talking about post-colonial literature, then we are looking at multiple locations, and all these locations are multilingual, they are multiracial, they have different histories. When we are clubbing them together under an umbrella term post-colonial literature, that is, say, from comparative literature perspective, that is a problematic term. And on the other hand, we can see all of us, we are citing Ngugi wa Thiong'o and his quest for relevance. But if we remember, like we should remember that the essay, The Quest for Relevance, which was the fourth essay in the anthology, Decolonizing the Mind, but the full name of that particular text is Decolonizing the Mind, the Politics of Language in African Literature. And in Quest for Relevance, Ngugi actually talked about the fact that in 1968, 28th September, Dr. James Stewart, at that point of time, the HOD of Department of English, he actually proposed a proposal about, say, the development of English department. And he argued that they should build a strong syllabus by its study of historic continuity of a single culture throughout the period of emergence of the modern West. And see, the 1 month after that proposal, in 24th October 1968, 3 lecturers, Tabanlo Leong, Aniur Unyumba, and Ngugi wa Thiong'o, they actually proposed that abolishment of English department, and their argument was that they are trying to introduce a particular syllabus around literatures of Africa. So as a conclusion, I would rather argue for closer introspection as well as interactions with other colleagues regarding methodology of comparative literature and the politics of the naming a center departments of CL, comparative literature, and quote unquote doing CL in 21st century India. Thank you.
सर जी, ज्योति प्रकाश जी आपके आसपास हैं क्या?
जी 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 मैडम बोल रहा हूँ।
शायद मालादी का कनेक्शन।
हाँ, उनका कंप्यूटर जो है।
हाँ, तो आगे क्या आप देखिए फिर
करेंगे। अच्छा
नेक्स्ट ये है
मृण्मय।
अच्छा, now I will request Mr. Mrinmoy Pramanik to present his paper. Mrinmoy जी।
Thank you.
Pramanik sir, आपके पास वो बायो नोट नहीं है ना? Somebody should read his bio note. It's unfair.
No, Malaji is joining again. She will read.
Yeah, so it can
time he can start.
Read out later also. Sir Bharma ji, I would like to request you, if possible, can you enable me to share my screen? It is possible because I have a small PPT to show. Because most of the names I will be referring might be unknown to the audience. So
share screen with whom?
No, I will share a screen, but host disabled participant screen sharing. It is actually disabled. So if you enable.
अच्छा, just a minute, I will see.
हाँ, ये सर इसको प्लीज एनेबल करके ही रखिए क्योंकि मुझे भी जरूरत होगा.
इसमें है allow to record local files?
No screen sharing option. Rindon, are you here? Rindon, can you please help?
Yeah.
Share screen option. I mean, how to enable host to share.
Okay, we have done that already. So you try to come.
Just a second.
Yeah, how to do that, Mrinmoy ji?
Rindon may help you. Rindon.
Mrinmoy, I can share the screen. I can see that from my end, this sharing screen is enabled.
but host disabled participants, when I am clicking on the button, it shows that host disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh, okay, okay. Just a second.
Once you click there, then I think.
Yes, yes, you're right.
Yeah, yeah.
Rindon, you're able to share your screen. How come?
No.
You can't, right?
No.
Yeah.
No.
He just found the button.
Yeah. My God, I thought, what is going on? अच्छा, वो वर्मा जी, आप होस्ट हैं क्या?
जी.
आप होस्ट हैं, तो आप अपना फैसिलिटीज में जाइए, देखिए वहां पे enable participant screen sharing लिखा होगा.
Okay. What I will request in the meantime, Mrinmoy ji, you can start your paper. I will call the expert.
He needs the screen share to project. तब जाके शुरू करेंगे ये.
Okay.
अभी वैसे ही कर दो. अभी वैसे he can start because we are losing time.
Sir ji, how can he start if he wants to show something?
Okay, wait.
He can.
Let him wait.
He can expect. He can.
आप रुकिए, कर दे रहे. হলো কিনা দেখো.
হ্যাঁ দেখো.
হয়েছে?
না.
হয়নি?
Verma ji, what you have to do, you have to go to the share screen option from your end and see that there is a select multiple participants can share simultaneously option. You click on the share screen option.
Hello, Mrinmoy ji.
हाँ.
Just wait for a minute. I have called the expert. Just wait for 1 minute.
जी.
Okay.
না.
এই মালাদি,
হ্যাঁ,
তুমি চলে গিয়েছিলে হঠাৎ করে, যার জন্য মৃন্ময়ের বায়ো নোট আমরা কেউ পড়তে পারিনি, শুনতেও পাইনি.
You know, my phone, my laptop logged off, so now I'm on the telephone.
करना चाहते हैं वो मेरे को नहीं आ रहा. वो जो स्पीकर है मृन्मय जी, हाँ तो वो मांगे परमिशन, तो मांग रहे हैं ना वो. तो स्क्रीन से वो लोग करें ना.
Should I introduce Mrinmoy?
Just a minute. Yeah, now tell Pramanik ji, tell our colleague what exactly you want.
Yeah, sir, I want to share my screen.
So share from our side, sir.
Yeah, but it is showing that the host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay. क्या नाम है?
So Rindon suggested if you go to the share screen option at your end, then you will find the option to enable us, all the participants, to share their own screen.
जो बोलना है.
Try now, sir.
Okay. Yes. Thank you so much. Yeah, now I can do it. Yeah. So it is visible, right? My screen is visible.
I think Mrinmoy, Professor Maloshri Lal will introduce you, then you start the presentation.
Yeah. Sure.
So let me. So I'm happy to invite Dr. Mrinmoy Pramanik. He teaches at the Department of Comparative Indian Language and Literature, University of Calcutta. His areas of interest are translation studies, world literature, Dalit literature, Indian narrative tradition, and concept of Indian literature. Currently, Dr. Mrinmoy Pramanik works on India and Southeast Asia literary and historical dialogues. Recently, he completed a major research project on India-Burma relations. He presented papers in several national and international conferences and workshops, received quite a few grants to visit abroad. He has also delivered more than 25 invited lectures. He writes in Bengali and English and translates from Bengali, Hindi, and English. He edits 2 academic journals and works as a reviewer and editorial board member for a few other journals. He is also a member of the executive committee of the Comparative Literature Association of India. Along with teaching and research, he holds several academic and administrative positions. Over to you, Dr. Mrinmoy Pramanik.
Thank you so much, madam. My screen is visible to you?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. So first, I would like to thank the Secretary of Sahitya Akademi, Chairperson of English Board, Professor Sangjukta Dasgupta, and respected Chair of our session, Professor Malashri Lal, Professor Chandra Mohan, Professor Ipshita Chanda, and my friends and colleagues, Dr. Shoma Mukherjee, Dr. Rindon Kundu, and colleagues and friends present here. Today, I will be speaking on the Calcutta University's role and Calcutta history of studying Indian literature in Calcutta University. It is all about journey of almost 100 years. It's more than 100 years journey. So the title of my lecture is Birth of a Discipline, Comparative Indian Literary Studies at the University of Calcutta. So I would like to focus on three aspects in my lecture. And those three aspects are age of national literature, age of locating bhasha, and age of literary cartography. So let me begin with the idea of age of national literature and what do I mean by this. Introduction of Indian languages in the University of Calcutta was a phenomenal incident. When Sir Gurudas Banerjee become appointed as Vice Chancellor at the University of Calcutta in 1890, he, in his convocation address, focused that Indian languages are ignored and marginalized in our knowledge practice. So Indian languages, academic study of Indian languages should be introduced in the university. But nobody of the university authority and the Indian University Commission paid much attention to Gurudas Banerjee's urge and appeal to introduce Indian languages. Later in 1891, Sir Ashutosh Mukherjee also proposed and firmly proposed his idea on Indian literature, several Indian literatures, and urged to introduce Indian literature in Calcutta University. So it was after almost 3 decades when Indian literature as an academic discipline started to be studied in the University of Calcutta. It was 1919 when the Department of Indian Vernacular was introduced at the University of Calcutta. Later in 1930, the department was renamed as Department of Modern Indian Languages. And in that department, there was a system of entrance examination, and entrance examination used to be held in 2 languages, one English, which was compulsory, and among the optional languages, the candidate could choose any one language from Greek, Latin, Hebrew, Arabic, Persian, Sanskrit, Bengali, Hindi, Urdu, Oriya, Burmese, Khasi, Parvatiya, Assamese, and all. And it was a remarkable historical and revolutionary step what was pursued by Sir Ashutosh Mukherjee and the then Vice Chancellor Sir Debaprasad Sarvadhikari and all with the Indian University Commission. Later, when the Department of Indian Vernacular was introduced, their structure was to study Indian literature from 3 aspects. One was the main language study, one is the subsidiary languages, and another was the basic languages. So what were the main languages offered at the University of Calcutta? The main languages were Bengali, Hindi, Oriya, Gujarati, Maithili, Urdu, and Assamese. And the subsidiary languages was Assamese, Urdu, Oriya, Kannada, Gujarati, Tamil, Telugu, Bangla, Marathi, Malayalam, Maithili, Sinhali, and Hindi. And the subsidiary languages were Pali, Prakrit, and Persian. Later, Sir Ashutosh Mukherjee, in his several lectures and essays, he proposed his very thoughtful idea of Indian literature. He was Vice Chancellor from 1906 to 1914 and 1921 to 1923. In a literary festival, literary meet in Howrah district in 1914, Ashutosh Mukherjee talked about Jatiyo Sahitya, which means national literature. And in 1920, after the First World War, he talked about Bharatiyo Sahitya Bhavishyat, future of Indian literature. And in these two lectures, and which were later printed as essays, he proposed his idea of imagining Indian nation with reference to different Indian languages, history, and culture. And he again and again
कट गया। Should I call him?
Yes, sir. I think you should. Rindon, maybe you should call him. It'll be faster.
Yeah. I'm doing it.
I'm extremely sorry. I was disconnected due to my internet connection. So, hello. Should I resume my presentation?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was talking. Okay, subsidiary languages and all I have talked. I think Pali Prakrit I talked. I was talking about Jatiyo Sahitya and Bharatiyo Sahitya, right? Because I don't know when I disconnected. So in this Jatiyo Sahitya and Bharatiyo Sahitya, through this he proposed his ideas that most of the, all the parts of India should introduce courses on Indian literature, and they should follow the structure of main language and subsidiary language, as we can have a very good, brilliant future generation who can build communication among different Indian languages and different Indian literatures. After that, gradually, we found that this department was actually abolished, and emergence of single literature department at the University of Calcutta. And after that, when we were celebrating 150 years of University of Calcutta, we actually introduced a new department called Department of Comparative Indian Language and Literature. Through that department, Professor Vishwanath Roy and other professors of Bengali language and literature, who were again visualizing, trying to envision, trying to put forward the Ashutosh Mukherjee's vision of Indian literature, they introduced a course in comparative Indian language and literature, and they tried to bring back to Ashutosh Mukherjee's idea that a journey from Ashutosh Mukherjee imagined Indian literature as a journey from single literature to multiple literature, and a collaboration among small states to create a great empire of Indian literature. So now so when we established this department, this MA course in comparative Indian language and literature, our syllabus was quite horizontal. Right, I mean, the Bengali language was in focus, and with Bengali language and literature, other Indian languages and literatures used to be compared. So the professors and the thinkers who introduced comparative Indian language and literature as a master's course, they tried to focus on Indian Bhasha, the Bangla literature, Bangla language, and connect other language and literature with Bangla language and literature. Because the infrastructure, what was there in the time of Ashutosh Mukherjee, was not there in 2005. So they put this structure to connect Ashutosh Mukherjee's idea with the present conjuncture. And we have to remember that it was the time of theoretical emergence of concept of Bhasha, when Ganesh Devi was working on Bhasha, Boli, and Bhasha literature and all. Here I have put the question paper of our old syllabus when Professor Vishwanath Roy, Professor Bimal Mukherjee, they introduced this course. Then in 2015, a full-fledged Department of Comparative Indian Language and Literature was established, transformed at the University of Calcutta. And we would like to see it as an age of literary cartography when we are initiating and, when we are negotiating with different aspects of humanities, social science, and we are widening our literary imagination. So we have our own literary cartography to shape our discipline. And when we changed our syllabus in 2018, we focused on to expand our horizon by following the path of our maestros like Dinesh Chandra Sen, who proposed the idea of Brihat Bongo, Suniti Kumar Chatterjee, who proposed the idea of Brihattara Bharat, and Prabodh Chandra Bagchi, who introduced Bharat o Madhya Prachya and Bharat o Indochina in the first half of 20th century. And these ideas actually help us to reconceptualize the map of Indian literature by focusing Southeast Asian literature, by focusing the literature of different other states where Indian people were settled. And in our new syllabus, we are trying to locate Indian literature locally also. Therefore, several marginal languages of West Bengal also have been included in our syllabus. Here, I have put some question paper from those courses where we are talking about Limbu, we are talking about Sadri as a lingua franca among the tea garden laborer, we are talking about Shabar language, Santali language, etc. in Lepcha, etc. in this syllabus. Recently, I have completed a major research project on India and Southeast Asia and the point of cultural dialogues and exchanges after the age of Ramayana and Mahabharata. I had started my work from colonial period when the modern slavery, the concept of modern slavery was introduced, and I was trying to locate the path of indentured labor in different empires of British colony, and I was trying to connect these colonies to find our new map of Indian literature. When I visited Rangoon in 2 years ago, I found some journals published by Bengalis in 1961. It was Pragoti. It is just 50 years of the publication of this journal, and this journal is not kept or archived anywhere. I luckily found few copies of it, and I found that this can be our new ways to talk about Indian literature along with the several other diasporic authors of indentured of the community of indentured labor from Trinidad, from Mauritius, from Philippines, from Malaysia, from Burma, from Thailand. I can also remember about U.R. Khadir, a Malayalam author who born and brought up in Burma and wrote throughout his life on the Burmese content. So this is how we can extend our horizon and boundary of Indian literature, and we are trying to address those in our discipline. in research and in academic study of masters. So I have put just some photos of indentured labor from Burma whose next generations are actually surviving with the memories of Indian freedom fighting and the memories of Indian National Army, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose and all. So these are the photos to show you. Now let us talk about the contribution of our department and how do we address comparative literature to serve the discipline. Comparative literature as a special paper was introduced long ago in the Bengali language and literature department at the University of Calcutta, and now we have introduced compulsory Indian language learning course in our MA curriculum, remembering the vision of Sir Ashutosh Mukherjee. And also with the suggestion of Professor Vishwanath Rai and all who actually envisioned the discipline. And we have introduced 4-credit course on comparative Indian language and literature in several colleges in the Bengali and English master degree for the Bengali and English master degree student in several colleges to enhance and to expand our horizon of comparative literary studies and studying comparative Indian literature. We have been organizing several national seminars, particularly focusing on different Indian mainstream literature as well as marginal literatures. We are also focusing on collaborative translation to enhance the skill of the students because the translation is our necessity, and Pramod Chaudhary called that our age is age of translation.
Mrinmoy, I think we need to get on with the session. Are you there?
No, I think he's lost connection.
Yeah, well, I had lost connection for a while too. Maybe we should then move on to Ipshita.
I mean, I'll be happy to start, but I think we'll just call him and tell him that like he's lost connection. Otherwise, he won't realize.
Yeah.
I mean, I think either Rindon or
somebody
Varmaji.
Has his phone number. Could please
some numbers are with either Rindon or Varmaji. Could call him.
Yeah, I have already informed him.
Move on to Ipshita.
Okay.
I think we'll move on to Ipshita. I was able to hear Rindon though on the phone, not on the computer, but I think he's made a very, very important contribution to how one looks at the comparative angle of various literatures, including Bengali from Burma. So let's move on then to the fifth and final speaker on the panel, Professor Ipshita Chanda. She teaches comparative literature at the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad, and served formally in the comparative literature department at Jadavpur University, Kolkata. And though Ipshita has not given us a longer formal CV, I have known Ipshita's work when she was a member on the English Advisory Board of the Sahitya Academy, and the enormous contribution that Ipshita has been able to make in the realm of comparative literature, especially in terms of theory, with wonderful illustrations from a variety of literatures. So over to you, Ipshita. Mrinmoy, we'll come back to you later. Okay. Yes, please, Ipshita.
Thank you very much, Maladi. Only you could be so gracious. Thank you very much. Actually, it's a great privilege to be here. And I don't know what to start off with, because I would like to do 3 things. And I'd like your advice on which of the 3 things I will do in the next 10 minutes. The first is to respond to the questions that you put, which were extremely topical at the moment. And they actually relate to the way in which comparative literature has changed from the time it was introduced, as Chandra Mohanji told us, in the 50s at Jadavpur University. That is one question. I mean, that is one trajectory I could take. The second thing is I would like to respond primarily to what my colleagues have said. What Chandra Mohanji has said, of course, is the pre-story, basically. But what my colleagues have said, and I have had the privilege of teaching all of them. So that's a great privilege. They're my colleagues now. So I would like to respond to what they said, because in a sense, that too is the way in which comparative literature has changed in the last so many years since it was introduced at Jadavpur University. And finally, that is what I thought I would be doing. Your last question, actually, that, I mean, how has comparative literature changed? What does it look like now? I think it's very interesting for me as a teacher and a scholar of comparative literature to say that the way in which my colleagues have imagined the future of comparative literature to look like, it's not that I disagree with any of it. I mean, I have some serious theoretical problems with quite a number of these things, but I think that the way in which they are thinking about it from the point of view of, to start with Mrinmoy, Greater India, or to go to what Shoma was saying and what Mrinmoy also said, the relations between languages and literature, especially in the Indian situation, which is the question that you asked right at the beginning, that how has comparative literature actually articulated itself into the Indian scenario. My last, or my only thing that I wanted to say earlier, first, when I sort of thought of what I was going to say, was to answer that question. So I have our syllabus, actually, which we teach at the English and Foreign Languages University. And what I would like to share more than the syllabus itself, but I don't think I'll have time to share, so I will just say that the crucial points in that way of thinking can be sort of mapped as a locus of 3 or 4 different points, which are all dynamic and all in relation with each other. One is plurality, which is something that fits. I mean, I'm sorry to say fits, because I'm saying nothing fits, because everything is in constant relation with each other. So it's a matter of dynamism. I won't say it is flux, but it is interaction. So plurality is a theoretical concept, I think, which is inherent in the practice of comparative literature. And I would like to emphasize that comparative literature is a practice. It is not an object. So however much, what we tend to do is that we tend to integrate themes from everywhere. And we think that, we feel satisfied. I'm not saying that we should not feel satisfied. What I'm trying to say is that this integration is actually what both comparative literature as an aesthetic, comparative literature as theory, and comparative literature as ethics actually teaches us. Because there is plurality in the world. Plurality is a condition of our being. And the strength of comparative literature is that in the word comparative itself, we assume that there is more than one. There is the assumption of plurality in that space. And that, of course, you can understand fits India very well. So comparative literature, by the very fact of its definition, is a way of engaging with the different language literatures that there are in India, which is why I think to call it comparative Indian literature is, calling a circle round. It's a syllogism. It's a tautology in a certain sense. Comparative literature is the way, the method, the approach that we have to take, and I'm saying have to advisedly, we have to take towards any Indian language literature, which is why I do not hold so much with the politics. Why do I call a particular literature marginal? Why do I subscribe to that discourse? Why do I call a particular literature tribal? Okay, I'm not going to get autobiographical here, but the point is that, you see, my my doctoral work was in the literatures of Africa. And when I went to my supervisor saying I want to work on African literature, the first thing he told me was, Africa is a continent. So, and this was Professor Manavendra Bandyopadhyay, who was instrumental in introducing Indian literatures. He's been a Sahitya Akademi awardee as well for the translation of Bashir, and for introducing Indian literatures both into the syllabus of comparative literature, as well as to the Bengali reading public. So I think that the formation of comparative literature in India inherently had what Shoma reminded us of, that multiculturalism or plurilinguality or plurality or living with difference is not a choice that we have. In India, that is our reality. And so the comparative approach is the only way in which we can access that reality. Difference is the overarching, I think the overarching, I won't call it theme, it's the binding factor of comparative literature. Whatever we study, whether it is, and that was another question that you asked about whether this is applicable to the arts, which is why I said that it is an aesthetic, it is a theory, as well as an ethic. So I'd like to only speak about the ethics part of it, because I think that will address the possible problems that Rindon was talking about, that we do not have a full-fledged comparative literature department anywhere in Orissa. Both those places that he talked to us about, Utkal as well as Sambalpur, have had long associations with the comparative literature department in Jadavpur. And the reason for that is that it was very clear to us, as Chandramohanji has pointed out. You see, here I will use the word politics, I think, or policies actually. The policies that were made regarding the teaching of literature and the fashioning of syllabi across time. The introduction of the comparative literature net at the UGC, as Chandramohanji has pointed out, was a very important landmark in establishing a discipline. But then the question was, who would apply for the complete net? Because there were only, let's say, 30 or 40 students at Jadavpur University who had an MA in comparative literature. So we are talking in terms of policies and numbers. But the way in which that was solved was, in fact, by creating linkages with what we call, and I think now we are wrong, and I'll just end with why I think we are wrong, what we still call single literature departments. And single literature departments, English especially, to some extent Bangla as well, but also very strange departments, like we in Calicut, the comparative literature department and Russian were together, you see. So, I mean, you would automatically understand the impulse for a thing like that. So that is why I'm saying that we need not have any overarching ideas, but a cementing force, which I propose is plurality and difference. And the basis of the method would be to study the relation between self and other. That is something that comes into any encounter, whether it is a cross-cultural encounter or whether it is a human encounter. And as Edward Said said, humanities looks for a usable praxis within the academia, which applies to our daily existence, as a matter of fact. And I think that is the approach that comparative literature teaches us, literally as Indians. I mean, I'm so glad you asked that question, Maladi, because that's the most important question for comparative literature at the moment. That, it is not geopolitics that we are talking about, but it is the attempt to understand difference and to relate to it, because I think that is the only kind of possible way of salvation in the situation that we have created by, hardening differences and refusing to engage in conversation. And I mean, it's a very, I think, again, to address what Rindon said regarding the post-pandemic world, the way in which we have dealt with the pandemic, I think is something that was, I would like to say, is something that was given to me by my discipline. Because you see, this very idea of a seeming homogeneity was something that we automatically had to question when we saw what was going on in the larger world. And our ability to engage with the difficulties of others, regardless of whether they were our students or the administration or our colleagues. Because you see, I mean, for the first time in very many years, I think we have been able to think, or we have had to think of the presence, even though not the physical presence, but the actual presence of the other in the world, because we have had to maintain a distance from the other. So I think we have understood what it is to be, you know, disengaged. And I think this disengagement is something that has, you know, caused us to look very carefully at what the discipline of comparative literature gives us. Actually, I think usable praxis, which our students hopefully can, you know, use in order to live with the difference that is our Indian reality. And it's a matter of pride to say that I think that the connections, I think it was a very important idea that Rindon put across. There is a network. There is a network, and that network has been facilitated by the pandemic because of the fact that you can speak to anybody at all during the pandemic online, right? So this opportunity is there. And I would like to suggest to my younger colleagues that, I mean, I'm sorry to call you younger, huh? But I would like to suggest to my colleagues that you don't need to suggest this, you only need to do it. That's all. Thank you. I think comparative literature has a very bright future.
Thank you, Ipshita, for a very thoughtful response to many of the important issues that have come up from the panelists, and the optimistic note on which you have ended this presentation from your side, that you believe it has a very important future, and that in any case, the foundational aspect of comparative literature is what in India is going to matter when we respect the other, even while we're thinking of ourselves for being at whatever center we are. So I do appreciate that very much. We have about half an hour, which is wonderful. I have put in a note for the audience to put in their questions and queries. I don't know if anything is going to come in or whether this particular chat is visible to the participants. So I will carry on unless Sahitya Akademi has some other suggestions. Because having listened to each of you very carefully, there are many thoughts in my mind, which I would like to just put those ideas back to each of you, where I thought a little more discussion would be useful for taking this conversation forward. Dr. Chandra Mohan, who gave us an excellent history of how comparative literature evolved in India and has quoted the pioneers in the field within academia who put this forward. And Dr. Chandra Mohan also reminded us of the institutional support for comparative literature that has come from the UGC. So I'd like to ask Dr. Chandra Mohan that do you agree with Ipshita that comparative literature has a bright future and that it is almost an imperative discipline within literary concepts and practices in India, because that is the only way we will understand the diversity and the plurality of the country? Please unmute yourself, Dr. Chandra Mohan.
It's okay?
Yes.
It's okay?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you, Malaji, for giving a little more time. Now, in my presentation, I had left out one important point, and that is the ICLA Standing Research Committee on South Asian Literatures and Cultures. First, I will respond to what you have asked and what senior colleague Ipshita has said. Now, look, Malaji, let me tell you that during the last 4 or 5 years, there is a very big dimension to comparative literary studies, and this impetus has come from international body. international body we didn't know much earlier, but the way they have made ways for CLI, for our universities, and that is marvelous. For instance, ICLA Standing Research Committee thought that they have all kinds of committees which are working within their periphery. Then we pointed out there, I said, what about South Asia? Why have you left it out? You have other countries, European, Chinese, this. They said yes. Then we, myself, Ifta, and Jasbir, all put together our heads and prepared. EVR was there, and it was accepted. And this is such a resourceful area where we have more or less done what was expected of us to do. We had kept 21 members in the research committee, out of which 7 are from the SAARC countries. And SAARC countries include one from Bangladesh, second is from Bhutan, third is from other places. So Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Maldives. So this was really a milestone to go ahead. And it answers your question and also the point raised by Professor Ifta Chanda. Actually, this research committee does 2 works. For instance, within India, for instance, last time we had a wonderful conference on South Asian narratives, which was held in the Central University of Jammu. But at the same time, we had people from Nepal, Bhutan, who have been with us, and they also contributed. Bangladesh, for example, Mashroor is a regular member of us coming from Bangladesh. Then this time, Sunana Sameri from Pakistan. So this is something which was missing in our comparative literary studies. Now they are very handy, and they do all these things very much there. And
Chandramohan, I'll move on to the next speaker, so we all get a little time to come back with our responses. So, Rinda,
I will only sum up one thing.
Yeah.
I agree with you. So I will only tell you 2 things in 1 minute. One is that comparative literature in Indian context and in world context has definitely made a headway. And we today, in 2021, really shine in the curriculum, in the periphery, in the orbit of in comparative ICLA, International Comparative Literature Association of India. This is one point which we know IFTA has already spotted it. And secondly, even in South Asia, which is, I personally value it very much because they are adjoining countries, they are also now doing things in collaboration with us, and we are trying to do research-based publications also with them. And this is a kind of going ahead.
Thank you. Dr. Kundu, I'll turn to you now. Among the many important points that you made, there's one which I would like a little more development about, because it's a very good radical academic suggestion, that the resources for comparative literature exist in different universities. And given the fact that the UGC is now supporting COMPLIT and that the NEP document also makes mention of it, that universities could come together to share their resources and also allow for credit transfer. Now, you are teaching in a private university, a new university, and I do like this kind of, I'm personally in favor of this kind of very progressive thinking. Do you think in practical terms this is possible?
Thank you, ma'am. First of all, before I answer your question, I forgot to mention another important thing that UGC has adopted, the rule of this allied discipline. And because of this rule, now the English departments, whether in colleges or universities across India, they are accepting the proposal the comparatists to teach in their English departments. Some of my friends, they're working in colleges in English departments. A lot of my friends, they're working in English departments across India. So I think we, the comparatists, can take this opportunity and can take this further, because we have seen the English departments across India, how they have adopted cultural studies, comparative literature, translation studies, and offered them as special papers under the single literature framework. Now, in this way, the English departments, they have appropriated these disciplines as its subsidiary, and therefore somehow, it has also caused the growth of comparative literature in India, as far as I understand. So I think, with this coming of these new universities and the liberal arts departments, we can think how our colleagues, our students can take up the job in English department, single literature departments, and can change those departments from inside. Now, coming to your question, I think that, before the suggestion that I have given, it's all based on this national education policy, the way they are conceptualizing the credit transfer. Unless and until we have a policy document about the structure of the credit transfer as proposed in the NEP 2020, we cannot start this. And I completely agree with Ipshita, my teacher, that we already have the network. The only thing that we need now, this policy document, how we will conceptualize this credit transfer. Say, for example, my students, they are working in they are having this comparative literature paper, world literature paper in graduation, post-graduation. And in the department, only I am the teacher that who can teach these two papers. Obviously, that is, lacking the resource. So if we had that, this network in the sense we had the network, I'm saying this policy that my students can go to, say, EFLU or Vishwabharati or Calcutta University or Jadavpur, and can pick up those, say, ADS studies like Canadian literature, African literature, the Indian literature papers. So we first need to, I hope that, the policy makers of the NEP, they have already thought about it. I'm sure that very soon we'll see that policy coming. But unless and until we have that policy, I think, whatever I suggested cannot be actualized.
Thank you. Yes, that's going to take us further on the way of implementing these possibilities, which certainly enrich the resources of any individual department if you can log on to somebody else's research and academic corpus. May I come to Professor Shoma Mukherjee? I heard about how this seminar and thoughtful work on comparative literature was to be hosted at Vishwabharati. And this has been a very difficult year for all of us, including the Sahitya Academy. And we're just very glad to have you here with the points of view that you've given. And in the future, I'm sure Sahitya Academy, and I certainly with it, hope that we will physically have a seminar on the subject that you and your department colleagues had suggested, which was on a broader framework and a more theoretical, philosophical one. And today in no way bypasses the significance of what you will, I hope, be able to call people to the campus and do a symposium there. Based on the presentation, what I found very fascinating was the Ramkatha story, the tradition on which you have worked in great detail. I've done some amount of work on Sita in that book that I co-edited with Namita Gokhale. Now, in the Ramkatha tradition, you talked about the synchronic and the diachronic levels and how looking at the Ramkatha from different traditions can bring us alternative viewpoints on the same story. Now, to what extent does this cohere with what you were saying is the new comparative literature? What is the new part of it if one were to take the Ramkatha as a sample?
Thank you, Professor Lal. See, I have read your book, that edited book, In Search of Sita. I actually read that book during my PhD. See, my understanding of Ramkatha is that tradition, I am looking at that tradition as a case study, an important part of, say, the Indian literature, and see how I am as a student of comparative literature, how I am applying the methodology to study that particular case. It is a literary case. I am looking at that, and it's not new. See, when we are talking about the new interpretation of, say, the Ramkatha, there are already existing works like A.K. Warder in his introduction to, in his history of Kabya literature, probably in one of his volumes, he is arguing that, see, when we are looking at the Kabya literature, the later Kabya literature, and see the existing texts which actually, see, Shakuntala, Obhigyan Shakuntalam, which was borrowed from Mahabharata Shakuntala Upakhyan. So, and see, we can cite that Valmiki Ramayana and Bhavabhutir Uttar Ramcharit, etc. And see, the citing Anandavardhan, Warder is arguing that that these are in a way retelling of, say, the existing, see, the writing of Puran and Itihas, and they are introducing, see, the characters which are known to the plot, the story, the characters which are known to the audience, and they are attracted to that particular text because of, say, some new twist. The story structure are the same, but they are introducing certain twists and turns, and they are evoking a different rush or maybe a different emotion. And if I can connect that particular argument in contemporary time, I can connect that particular argument with, say, the contemporary tradition of Ramkatha, or maybe when we are retelling Mahabharata and any other. See, throughout the world, if we can look out, if I can cite that that Percy Jackson series, or maybe any other popular literature where the target audience is the children, even, say, in all these series, they are relooking, they are retelling the Roman and Greek and Roman myths within these series. So these kind of literary trends is not see, when we are talking about Ramkatha, or maybe when we are talking about the Mahabharata tradition, it's specific to our culture. But we also know that Ramkatha tradition actually traveled to Southeast Asia, and there are, see, the different manifestations, and there are variations because, see, the contemporary local socio-cultural contexts are different. So in a way, I am not saying that this is a new tradition, or maybe we are looking at all these texts as new texts. I am trying to say is that as Shishir Das was saying, he actually said that these are the traditions, texts which we inherited, and we are making them contemporary because of, say, we are introducing certain new twists and turns. And obviously these contemporary texts are related to our contemporary situation, which is, say, in a way, when Ipshita was saying about, she was talked about the diversity, the plurality. In a way, we are looking at that inherited text traditions and making them our, see, the reality. See, that would be my argument at that particular, at this moment.
I think that's extremely thoughtful. That it's another way of looking at Ramkatha. There's so many ways in which we can look at it, but coming from the comparative literature viewpoint, there's a certain kind of theoretical lens that comes to it, as Ipshita was also mentioning, which leads me to my thoughts about what Mrinmoy Pramanik was saying, particularly that aspect that you picked up, Mrinmoy, about the Brihot Bharat and your research in Burma and coming upon the Bengali Journal of 1861. If you're looking at India pre-partition, in fact, the larger India, which included what is today Bangladesh, which included Burma, all that. So when we are talking about comparative literature in the context of Indian universities, where do we draw the national boundary? Is it the modern India today, or would some researchers such as you would also like to go back to the linguistic linkages that we have with other areas of South Asia, particularly those that were even geographically India at one time, the undivided India at one time. What would be your thoughts about that?
Thank you. Thank you so much, madam. First of all, I would, say that the plurality, Indianness, and diversity of Indian literature is very much there in the very concept of comparative literature when we are doing and conceptualizing it in Indian context. But today, I actually tried to focus on something more. My point was the location of university. The geocultural location of university is very important to reshape the curriculum and redefine the syllabus of comparative literature. And when we are doing it at the University of Calcutta, my point is we already have the resources, some epistemological resources to reconceptualize India and Indian literature and Indian communities. When I go back to Southeast Asia or Middle East or different colonies of British Empire, I actually tracing that path with the theoretical line of some theoreticians who once imagined the Asian unity, once imagined the unity of Greater India with recognizing the diversity existed with the different Indian communities located in different parts of the world. So when we are talking about Southeast Asia and Southeast Asian literature and Indian contribution of that there, actually we are trying to focus more on the history of indentured labor and their post generation who are creating new literatures and connecting Southeast Asia and India again. It may be the literature what was produced in Burma in 1960s, I put the example, or maybe the literature produced by Yuva Khadir or the Mauritian French Indian author Ananda Devi, or the Rahul Bhattacharya's novel, what is called A Sly Company of Those Who Care. So these are the things. And when I talked about Ashutosh Mukherjee or Prabodh Chandra Bagchi or Dinesh Chandra Sen's Brihad Bharat or Suniti Chatterjee's Dinesh Chandra Sen's Brihad Bongo and Suniti Chatterjee's Brihad Bharat, my point is, my argument is, with this theoretical line, with this trajectory, we can expand our literary understanding to recognize the history of ideas and history of identities. So that was my point. And therefore, I found these three stalwarts, Dinesh Sen, Suniti Chatterjee, Prabodh Chandra Bagchi, and Sir Ashutosh are quite important. And they are not much discussed in our discourses of comparative literature in Indian context. So I was actually trying to focusing that, and we are yet to prepare that path. We are not, yet not did it, but we are yet to prepare that part. We're trying to conceptualize it.
I'm sure this will lead to new ways of looking at the material and the authors who certainly deserve to be remembered. Ipshita, there's so many important points that you brought up in your responses to the other panelists and your own contribution to the thought itself. May I take you on this issue of aesthetics and ethics? Because when we are looking at literature in certain kinds of literature in India, and Shoma's work on Ramkatha is one example, it's not limited to literary writing, as we all know. There is orature, there is music, there is poetry, there is dance. So where do we draw the lines? I mean, in the Indian theoretical traditions, if you're looking at Bharatnatyam Shastra, etc., one can't draw the line and say this is where literature is, but the department is called comparative literature. So what happens to material which is linked to music, painting, the other arts? Where is the scope for including them within comparative literature, or isn't there?
I mean, the simple thing is that theoretically, if we start from Bharat, he's not talking about literature. He's talking about the other arts. And only when it comes to Abhinav Gupta and then if we link that with Vakyapadya and think in terms of linguistic philosophy, then we are bang in the middle of literature. But it is derived from there. Abhinav Gupta is a commentary on Bharat, and Anandavardhan is similarly a commentary. And so the entire development, and if we are talking about Kavya separately, then I think it links to what Shoma says, because Shoma was talking about retelling from the point of view of narrative. But when you use the word katha, it does not necessarily mean that it's performed. So katha is a particular generic category in Bhamaha and downwards. So the distinction is both from the point of view of theme and from the point of view of form. That we could look at as kavya, but even there, I mean, okay, there is the mixing of, shabd and arth together, sahit, which makes sahitya. So we are talking again about linguistics and philosophy at once. So it's interdisciplinary all the way. But if you look at aesthetics, then obviously Indian aesthetics does not only talk about literature at all, but what we say traditionally about literature comes from that particular tradition of aesthetics that starts with Bharat. Of course, we can talk in terms of Dhvani also, but Rasa is one particular school of thought which applies across the board. It's an aesthetic idea. So therefore, I mean, that's one answer. But then we are only talking about, for example, the Sanskrit tradition. And there is also the interaction between the existing tradition, the Prakrits. And I think there is a great sort of merit in thinking about what we call Indian quote-unquote literature, I would like to say, because the same material can be inherited in a number of media. It's not necessarily always something that you trace back to something that is written. You can go even beyond that. And so there is across India in all the aesthetic systems. I mean, even if we talk about the Tolkappiyam, for example, even if we talk about, I mean, if we think in terms of, the sort of the erotic devotion of bhakti, if we think in terms of Jaidev, all of these are, inter-arts situations. Each of them has the particular raga in which you sing. You're supposed to use when you're speaking or when you're reciting or when you're singing. So I think that's not a difficulty at all. Our difficulty, I think, was that we did not pay attention to this particular stream of thought, which is why I would still want to show you, share with you the syllabus that we teach. But my screen sharing needs to be activated. So I think we'll be losing time on that. So.
Well, I think we will save some of the riches for the next session, which I'm sure they will.
Malaji, I will take half a minute. Malaji, I will take half a minute.
Dr. Chandramohan, I need to conclude this session.
No, I know, but
just hope that the Sahitya Academy
not more than half a minute.
Another follow-up program, a symposium on comparative literature, because it's very clear from the presentations today that this is a very, very rich field of inquiry, pertinent to our times and yet engulfing the history of the past and the continuities of debates that have happened between different literatures and also across literature into other genres, as we were just talking with Ipshita. And Dr. Chandramohan has given us the rich history, and each one of you has shared your perspective on what comparative literature has done and is capable of doing and can do to meet the challenges of the digital medium and our present times. So I'd like to thank each one of you for the enriching conversation and contribution that you have made. Each one of you is very, very significant to what has happened in the realm of comparative literature. And I'm sure Sahitya Academy will be interested in holding at least one more symposium in the coming year. The English board will do so, so that we can take this discussion further and directly to our students in physical form, perhaps. And this enriching ideas, the paradigms, the shifts that we're talking about will be helping us to think further. So may I conclude by thanking the audience and to thanking the panelists for their wonderful contribution, and to Jyoti Verma for coordinating this particular event, and of course to Dr. Rao, who is always there to oversee everything that we do in our programs. So Jyoti ji, would you like to come on the screen and say your words?
No, we are about to reach 4:30 deadline time, because another program is lined up at 5. So well done. You have done a good job. Thank you very much, Malaji. Thank you very much. And all the participants on behalf of the Sahitya Academy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And looking forward to seeing everybody at the next session on comparative literature. It certainly deserves this kind of detailed attention. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.